a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life?
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. 2 men have died and hundreds of properties have been flooded after Storm Bert brought torrential rain to large swathes of the country. The MP, whose assisted dying bill will be debated in Parliament this week, has rejected claims by the Justice Secretary that the proposed legislation is a slippery slope towards death on demand. And countries have agreed last-minute finance deal at the COP29 climate summit. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with political journalist Theo Usherwood and barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry. Welcome both. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Telegraph leads with a call by a former Met Police commissioner to review the use of non-crime hate incidents. The Eye reports on the assisted dying bill that is up for a vote next week, saying it is dividing the cabinet. The Metro leads with its campaign to address the rise in violence against women and girls. Meanwhile, the Mirror leads with their campaign for more regulation on beauty procedures. The Guardian says a defiant Rachel Reeves will rebuke critics of her tax-rising budget, telling business leaders that they have offered no alternatives. The Daily Mail leads on allegations that the GMB union has been branded a viper's nest, with the head accused of bullying. The Daily Star's front warns the UK is set to be battered by more storms in December. And the Sun's front features the mystery of Bobby Moore's missing 1966 World Cup shirt that was believed to be worth over £1 million. And the Times reports that Labour's tax rises in the budget are putting bosses off hiring employees. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Theo Usherwood and Anna Soubry. Thank you both so much for being with us on, a very, even in London, it's incredibly windy, although obviously we are not suffering what other people around the country. So let's start with the coverage of Storm Bert. Let's pull up the front page of the Daily Telegraph. And the picture actually, this I believe is Devon. Devon and obviously Wales, especially South Wales, really battered. Anna, what have you made, obviously, of the events, but also the coverage?
Well, it's not really, to be honest, it's on a number of our front pages. And as you say, this is on the front of the Telegraph. In fact, identical photograph is also on the front of the Guardian as well. But and it's clearly going to be one of those stories that we're going to learn more about as through the night and tomorrow morning. But I mean, there is chaos on our railways, for example. I noticed that East Midlands Railways across country have also cancelled huge numbers of trains, leaving passengers genuinely stranded with no form of replacement buses. So there'll be some big stories about that. In the meantime, there are a number of communities, notably in South Wales, and deaths, which have really suffered hugely from extreme flooding. and it's a serious crisis there. No doubt that crisis will get worse, and it will spread to other parts of Britain as well.
Yes, I mean, 5 people dead. We've got 100 millimetres of rain in South Wales, 100 flood warnings right across the country. I think this is going to be a test for Keir Starmer going into the week. He's going to have to act quickly. We saw the anger that spread in Spain around the Valencia region when we had those floods, and the governments was seen to be slow to act. The arguments between regional governments and the national government about who was responsible for the clean-up. And if you look at the front page of the Telegraph with that photograph of that woman mopping out the rain from her front garden, and then the devastation, I can only call it that, in Pontypridd, with the cars, absolutely, there's nowhere to go. I mean, the streets are flooded. It looks sort of 4 or 5 feet deep, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how Starmer responds, how quickly the response can be to get people's livelihoods back up and running again.
And this is the future. I mean, you see, all the way through, certainly my lifetime, we were told, well, no, these events happen once in every 50 years or 100 years. This is actually happening not just even once a year. This is a regular occurrence. And how we deal with it, how we live with what is, in my view, undoubtedly a result of the change in our climate, is, as you say, rightly a test of government. But it's a conversation we've got to have as a country as to what we want and how we are, if we are going to have to change our lives to accommodate these big climatic changes.
Let's move on now to the Eye front page. And the story that will obviously, I think, occupy probably the headlines for the coming week, the vote on the assisted dying bill on Friday. And here, the headline, Cabinet split over assisted dying as vote row deepens. And we've had various ministers, the Justice Secretary, the last one, coming out with their own opinions on this. What do you make of this?
The thing what we're not actually debating is the merits or otherwise of this private members' bill. And it's only the first part of it that will be debated on Friday. Instead, and Theo will know much more about this than I do, but how on earth has the Cabinet, the government, got itself into a position where the front page of the Eye, the story, is the fact that the Cabinet is split? That strikes me as a government that has handled this wrongly, because the government said it's not going to bring in this legislation. It will facilitate
It would allow time. So if it was to be filibustered on... Sorry, Anna.
No,
if it was to be filibustered
no,
on Friday, if it was to be talked out on Friday, the government would basically say, right, we'll bring our own legislation mirroring Kim Ledbetter's legislation, and we can bring that in government time on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So they'll allow time for it, but it will still, that will only happen if the legislation on Friday is talked out by MPs who are opposing.
Which it could be, as we both know. Yeah. There are procedures that will be put in place, and I think there is a good argument that we've not really had a proper national debate about this, and instead we're getting ourselves into this debate about which member of the Cabinet feels more outraged or otherwise by this bill, which in my opinion is a very sensible measure. But we're not actually debating the actual
Well, that's what Sir Edward Lee said, actually, quite recently. Hasn't been enough time to consider the complexities of this.
Forgive me, he would say that, in my view, because he's vehemently opposed to it. Then let's have that debate publicly. It's not... Parliament will have the time, because it will go through different stages, both in the House of Commons and then in the House of Lords. It goes into what we call the committee stage, which is really when you get really stuck into that legislation in proper detail. So the time is there. I think that's a bit of a red herring. What concerns me, that you could say, well, actually, opinion polls show the majority of people support the bill, that we're just not having the debate out here, and instead it's all about the government's tearing itself. It looks like it's tearing itself to pieces. It shouldn't be.
In
the
Daily Telegraph, the headline is assisted dying bill likely to pass.
And that's the irony of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the team around Kim Ledbetter and who are running the campaign, they've obviously done the numbers. They've spoken to MPs right across the House of Commons from all the various parties, and they've come to the conclusion that if everybody does as they say they're going to do, and of course that's never guaranteed in the House of Commons, but if everybody does as they say they're going to do, then the legislation will pass. And that, I think, has always been the feeling that this time around the legislation will pass. It was last a vote in 2015. It didn't at that point. MPs didn't vote in favour. But, from the numbers and given where public opinion is, 65% of the public in favour of this introduction of assisted dying, that actually this legislation, I think, will pass at second reading on Friday and ultimately come into law, you'd think, sometime in the first half of next year. But when I look at this legislation, you look at and I think Anna's quite right to pick up the front page of the Eye and this cabinet split of Wes Street and Shabana Mahmood on the one hand, and then apparently 14 other cabinet ministers who are actually supportive. And Keir Starmer, meanwhile, is there drumming his fingers saying, well, I've previously supported it, now I'm going to look through legislation line by line. Actually, I think the government should have owned this. I think it should be their legislation.
Really good.
It's a seismic piece of legislation, and it is whichever side of the debate you're on.
We don't have a lot of time, but let me just bring Anna in on this about the issue of the private members bill.
Well, beforehand,
I know
we were talking.
Exactly.
I should explain to people at home, and I said, of course, these are matters of conscience, and normally private members bill, as indeed in '67 with the Abortion Act, the legalised abortion in our country. But then, of course, I said to you, same-sex marriage. That was a bill that was introduced and successfully passed, very proud to have voted for it, by the coalition government of 2010 into 2015. And it was Theo who said, why didn't the Labour government bring this forward? It's a very modest measure, in my opinion, and lead the debate. And I think I think he's right on that.
Okay. Well,
we agree.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, no. Anyway, well, it'll obviously be discussed at length all week, and we are expecting the vote on Friday. Let's move on to the front page of The Guardian. No alternative to raising tax, defiant Chancellor to tell the CBI. Now, obviously, this linked to the budget and the tax rises there, or various changes. We saw the protests of farmers earlier on this week. There was the private sector output has shrunk for the first time in a year. Theo, tell us about this particular story.
Well, Rachel Reeves is going to be addressing the CBI, which is, of course, the main business lobby group, and she's going to be making in London tomorrow, and she's going to be making, of course, the point that it was necessary to increase national insurance contributions for employers to raise £25 billion. And this comes, of course, as the CBI has done its own survey of 266 companies, which suggests that nearly two-thirds are now reconsidering their recruitment plans. Rachel Reeves wants to go for growth, but the message from businesses and the message she's going to hear tomorrow from Ray Newton-Smith, who, of course, runs the CBI, is actually by increasing tax in this way, employers are now saying, hold on, we're not quite so sure about taking on more people. And that, of course, goes to Rachel Reeves' whole, raison d'etre as Chancellor, and that's for economic growth. And it doesn't look like she's going to get it if you're listening to business.
And that is the exact line that the Daily Telegraph is going with in its front page. Two-thirds of companies slash hiring plans after Reeves's budget. So front page of the Telegraph there. Anna.
But then, as she tells The Guardian, maybe in the Telegraph as well, she says, I've heard lots of responses to the government's first budget, but I have heard no alternatives. What is the alternative? This government said they weren't going to put up personal taxation, personal national insurance. I think the mistake that Labour made was when the Conservatives cut national insurance on employees by a very people barely felt it. But it meant that this black hole was really exacerbated. And Labour's mistake was they didn't say, we won't undo that cut. That's probably very bad English. That was the mistake that Labour did, because then it tied their hands, because Theo makes a good point, as obviously the CBI do, that her danger is if she wallops business overly hard, then she's in danger of scuppering the whole of her economic policy, which is rightly about growth. Growth comes from British business and investment from overseas.
And then there's all the things that were impossible to plan for. So, for example, the Trump election, the risk, I'm not saying we're about to go to war, but obviously the situation with Ukraine is becoming ever more tense, Theo.
Yes, I think the first thing is that when Labour went into the election, they were just so worried about the Conservative mantra that it's the same old Labour Party, tax and spend, and they wanted to portray themselves as being economically responsible. They could be trusted with the public finances, and that you weren't going to see your taxes go up if you voted for Labour. But that, as Anna said, that ties, by making those promises, especially, of course, when you look around the borrowing rules as well, by tying her hands, Rachel Reeves has meant that she's had to look elsewhere for the money. And in actual fact, if you were to take her at her word, going into the election not to increase national insurance, and then she's actually increased it for employers, then actually she's broken that promise. But I think the more important point, the more salient point is what Anna mentions, which is actually, if this government is going to be successful, it needs to pay for the public services in the medium to longer term, and there are some difficult decisions that are going to have to be made in the medium to longer term without increased tax revenues, then she's going to need economic growth. And that comes, like it or not, it doesn't come from government, it doesn't come from the man in Whitehall, it comes from people taking risks and people investing. And that's where you get economic growth.
But also government investment.
Yes.
And that's how she should be selling it to business, because that is what they are going to do. They are going to invest as well. And when you start to invest in infrastructure, that helps to generate growth. So I'm still with Rachel Reeves. I still back her, but she's no fool. She knows the risks that she runs. But as she says, what is the alternative?
And Theo, let's leave it there for now. Coming up, we'll also discuss this story on the Telegraph front that says ex-Met boss urges non-crime hate review.
Migrants risk their lives climbing aboard these trains in search of a dream, the United States.
It's really dangerous. They often get robbed on this train.
They suffer a lot by police, cartels.
What happens to them next, we just don't know. Do you miss your mum?
Yeah.
With Trump coming to the presidency, how much longer will people be accommodated?
The journey you've been through, it's been very difficult at times. Has it been worth it?
See.
This is a journey which goes by one name, the Beast.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict.
There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach.
I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it.
This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board.
So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board.
This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse.
We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first.
Help is slowly reaching these places.
It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust.
This is a picture of destruction.
Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation.
These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again.
Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me in the studio, Theo Usherwood and Anna Subri. Let's go straight to the front page of the Metro. One-word headline, enough. And it says, every 11 minutes, a woman or girl is killed in their own home. And now it's time for action to end what the Metro is calling an epidemic of violence. The numbers are shocking because I think it's also, is it 2 women a week, roughly, Anna, that are also killed?
Yes, and invariably they're killed by a partner, or an ex-partner, somebody they know. The other shocking statistic is that between 2018 and 2023, the Metro says, there was a 37% increase in crimes related to violence against women and girls. Look, as you know, I'm a criminal barrister, so I've come back to the bar, having been in Parliament, and one of the things that is really striking is the increase in these sorts of offences, an increase in assaults on partners in particular. And I'm all up for this campaign. It is a shocking epidemic and it needs sorting. But it won't get sorted when we've got the delays, the extraordinary delays that we have in the criminal justice system of bringing perpetrators to justice. If somebody's accused of murder, they'll be tried within 6 months because they'll be in custody. But if you're on bail, it can take literally years. It is unacceptable, and I'm afraid it's one of the things that this government's got to make a priority in terms of funding in order to shift this backlog, deliver justice and bring these stats down, because it's the only way to do it.
Can I just ask you, so we've seen this huge increase. Do you think that in part of it, it could be because more women are reporting these crimes?
It is, that definitely. So there's a number of things. One, it's because people are reporting it. Secondly, it's taken far more seriously. It's taken very seriously, not just by the police, but the CPS, by social services. There have also been changes in what we call the charging standards. So we now have an offence of intentional strangulation. I think I voted for it. My memory and recollection was that it was not for the way that it's being charged. In the past, if somebody put their hands around somebody's throat, which is obviously very dangerous, he was tended to be charged as what we call a common assault, maximum sentence 6 months can only be dealt with in the magistrate's court. Intentional strangulation, the Court of Appeal has said, one of the highest courts in the land, that should have a sentence of 18 months. Now, understandably, it is very serious if you put your hands around somebody's neck. So there's lots of different reasons why we've seen this increase. But I think we have, if we're being truthful and honest about this, I think we have got a problem with too many men who are still using their partners as punch bags, and we've got to stamp it out and make damn sure that their sons don't repeat these offences.
Yeah. And raising awareness like this campaign.
But we need more money in the criminal justice system to shift that backlog, bring people to justice.
Theo, let's go to the Daily Telegraph. Ex-Met boss commissioner urges non-crime hate review. This, of course, linked to the case of Alison Pearson, the Telegraph journalist.
Yes, so this is a report that's been done by the Policy Exchange think tank. It's a right-leaning think tank, and it's found that it's a recording of these non-crime hate incidents is now taking up 60,000 hours of officers' time every year. And of course, the argument is that it distracts them from fighting actual crime. Now, Lord Hogan Howe, of course, was the Metropolitan Police Commissioner going back 10 years, if my memory recalls rightly, said the government should now, this is according to the Telegraph, consider whether actually the police should be investigating these incidents at all. Now, these aren't crimes, and of course, this report comes off the back of this you can only call it a botched investigation into Alison Pearson, the Telegraph journalist. She was visited at her home on Remembrance Sunday by Essex Police and asked about a social media post that was over a year old, and then they subsequently dropped the investigation. And I think Keir Starmer's made the point as Prime Minister that the police need to focus on the crimes that matter to people: burglary, robbery. What we've been discussing on the front of the...
Yeah, but don't forget hate crime in Nottinghamshire. They absolutely specifically went for this sort of behaviour, not the Alison Pearson nonsense.
Yeah.
And actually, it did have an impact on the way that men and boys behaved. Just a small point.
OK, sorry, 20 seconds, front page of The Sun, 30 years of shirt Bobby Moore's missing. But
so now we come to the really important news, ladies and gentlemen, and that is that the shirt that Bobby wore back in 1966, when we won the World Cup, went missing from his ex-wife's home in Essex 30 years ago, and apparently, it's been found somewhere in Wales. and it's worth £1 million.
Okay.
Apparently.
Says
the Sun.
I can see people paying £1 million for it. Just got to be real.
Do you think this is true, though, for you?
Yeah, of course it is.
Anyway, on that note, Anna, Theo, thank you very much. And coming up next on Sky News at 11, the latest updates as Storm Bert sweeps across much of the country with hundreds of flood warnings and alerts in place. Tonight, we'll have all the details at the top of the hour.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometres away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.